In a far corner of the galaxy, where the stars were dim and the planets were poor, lived a mother named Leora. She was not a soldier, she was not a leader, she was not a famous explorer, she was only a mother, carrying her small child in her arms. Her people, the colony where she lived, had little respect for her. They valued strength in battle, power in politics, or skill in science, but they did not value motherhood. To them, raising a child was weakness, and weakness had no place in a cruel universe. Every day, Leora walked the dusty streets of the settlement with her child. Her clothes were worn, her hands rough, her eyes tired but filled with love for the little one who clung to her side. The other colonists looked away when she passed. Some whispered, some laughed. Others pretended she was not even there. They saw her as nothing, less than nothing, a burden that ate food and gave back nothing useful. But Leora knew in her heart that her child was everything. Her child's small laugh gave her hope. Her child's tiny hand gave her courage. Her child's dreams gave her purpose, yet still, she often wondered why no one else could see the beauty, the power, the sacred duty of being a mother. She asked herself if she was truly alone in this wide, empty universe at night. When the colony lights went out and silence filled the air, Leora would sit outside her small metal hut, holding her child close. She would tell stories of old stars, of faraway lands, of people who once cared for one another. Her child would listen with big eyes, smiling, asking questions, believing every word. And for a moment, the loneliness in Leora's heart would fade, replaced by warmth. But when morning came, the cold truth returned. The colony leaders walked past her without a glance. The merchants gave her only scraps of food. The guards laughed when her child played in the dust, saying, "That is no future warrior. Only a waste." Every cruel word cut her deeper, but she swallowed her pain, because her child must never see her break still. There were moments when despair threatened to swallow her, moments when her child asked questions she could not answer. One evening, after another long day of rejection, her child tugged at her sleeve and asked, "Mother, why does no one care about us? Why do they not see you?" Leora froze, the words striking like a blade, because she had no answer, no excuse, only silence. Her eyes filled with tears, but she turned her face away so her child would not see. She forced a smile, kissed the child's forehead and whispered, "Because they do not understand. But you and I, we are enough." Still inside her heart, she knew her child was beginning to see the truth that they were invisible to everyone else, the truth that the universe was cold and merciless, the truth that a mother's love, no matter how strong, could not change the way others judged her. But she also knew that she could never give up, no matter how hard the days became. Her child's life was worth every sacrifice, every wound, every insult, and so she carried on, walking those same dusty roads, enduring those same cruel stares, hiding her tears behind quiet strength. Every step she took was a promise to her child, a promise that she would protect, she would fight, she would endure, no matter what the galaxy thought of her, no matter how alone she felt. She would not stop being a mother, because being a mother was not weakness, it was the greatest strength she knew. But deep inside, Leora wished for something more. She wished that just once someone would see her, not as a burden, not as a failure, but as what she truly was, a mother who carried more courage than any soldier, more patience than any leader, and more love than any star could shine. She wished that one day, someone would look at her and say the words she had longed to hear, words that would tell her she was not invisible, that she was not forgotten, that she was not alone. As she tucked her child into bed that night, the colony outside as silent and indifferent as always, Leora whispered softly to herself, "Maybe tomorrow will be different." Her child slept peacefully, dreaming without fear, but Leora sat awake, staring at the dark sky, searching the stars for a sign that somewhere, somehow, someone might care. And in that endless silence, a question echoed inside her heart. How long can a mother carry the weight of the universe alone? The next day began like any other, the colony's gray skies hanging low, the air heavy with dust and smoke. Leora rose early, holding her child's small hand, walking through the narrow streets searching for food. She had learned long ago that no one would help her, but she still hoped to find scraps, enough to keep her child strong. The merchants sneered when she passed, the guards ignored her, and the leaders turned their heads away. For them, she was invisible, a shadow carrying a child who meant nothing. But this day was different. There was a strange unease in the air. The animals in the distance howled, The ground trembled slightly. The wind carried the scent of danger. Leora felt it in her bones. A mother's instinct that something was coming. Something terrible. She tightened her grip on her child's hand and whispered, "Stay close to me." Soon the warning alarms of the colony began to sound. A deep metallic echo that shook the streets. People shouted. Soldiers ran. Families locked themselves inside. "Raiders," someone cried. "The raiders are coming." These were not simple thieves. They were ruthless, hungry for blood. They had attacked colonies before, leaving ruins, stealing children, burning homes, and now they were coming here. Panic spread quickly. The colonists rushed to the shelters. Guards blocked the gates. Leaders ordered everyone to hide. But in the chaos, no one thought of Leora. No one thought of her child. They pushed past her, shoving her aside as if she was not even alive. Her child stumbled and fell in the dust, and no one stopped to help. Her heart raced, fear clawed at her chest, but she lifted the child quickly and ran. The sky darkened as the raider ships approached, their engines roaring like thunder. The ground shook when they landed, their iron doors opening to release figures in black armor. The colony walls trembled under the first blast. Smoke filled the air. Screams rang out. The people inside hid, praying the walls would hold. But Leora had no one to protect her. No soldier at her side. She only had her arms, her courage, and her child. Her child looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Mother, what will happen to us?" the little one whispered. Leora forced her voice to stay steady, even as terror burned inside her. "We will survive, my heart. Stay with me. Do not let go," she said. And together they ran, searching for a corner, a place where the raiders would not see them. But fate was cruel. A shadow fell over them. Heavy footsteps echoed. Armored raiders sweeping through the streets. One of them stopped, turning toward the alley where Leora tried to hide. The glow of his red visor cut through the smoke, and his weapon hummed with deadly power. He saw her, and worse, he saw the child. Leora's breath caught in her throat, every muscle screaming at her to move, to run. But there was nowhere to go. She pulled her child behind her, spreading her arms wide like a shield. The raider laughed, a cold metallic sound. "You think you can stop me?" "Woman," he sneered. He raised his weapon slowly, enjoying her fear. Her knees shook. Her heart pounded, but she did not step aside. She thought of all the nights she had held her child close, all the mornings she had fought for one more piece of bread, all the pain she had swallowed so her child could smile. She would not surrender, not now, not ever. With a cry, she threw a stone at the raider's mask. A useless act, but filled with defiance. He growled and swung his weapon down. Ready to strike, Leora braced herself, ready to die if it meant buying her child one more breath. Her child clung to her legs, whispering, "Mother, don't leave me." The sound broke her heart, but also gave her strength. The attack came suddenly. An explosion rocked the street, shaking the ground beneath them. The raider staggered, flames rising nearby, dust and smoke covering the air. Leora grabbed her child and ran through the chaos, her lungs burning, her eyes blinded by smoke. Every step was agony, but she forced herself to move, forced herself to fight through the pain. Behind her, the raiders roared. The colony walls shook again. More screams filled the air. She found shelter in the ruins of a broken building. Holding her child tight, her chest heaved, her hands shook, but she would not let go. Her child pressed against her, trembling, whispering, "Will we live, Mother?" She kissed the child's hair and whispered, "As long as I breathe, you will live." But deep inside, she knew the truth. She was one woman, alone, carrying a child in a universe that cared nothing for them. The colony had abandoned her. The raiders were too strong. She could not fight them forever. And for the first time, despair threatened to drown her completely. She pressed her forehead against her child's and closed her eyes, whispering, "Someone, anyone, please." Her voice was small, lost in the roar of battle, but it was filled with the deepest cry of a mother's heart. She did not know it then, but those words would not be lost. They would be heard, and soon someone would answer. The battle raged on, fire spreading across the colony walls, the sky painted red by explosions. Leora crouched inside the ruined shelter, her child clinging to her chest, both shaking, both coughing from smoke. She pressed her hand over her child's mouth to keep them quiet, praying the raiders would not find them outside. The heavy footsteps of armored soldiers echoed, their cruel voices calling out as they searched for survivors. Every second felt like an eternity. Every sound was a knife of fear. She was sure this was the end. She was sure no one would come. Because no one ever came, but then the ground trembled again, this time not from the raiders but from something else. A new sound cut through the chaos. A roar unlike the enemy ships. A deeper engine, steady and strong. The raiders paused, turning their heads to the sky, their voices uncertain for the first time. And in that moment, a shadow fell over the battlefield, a ship descending, its hull shining silver against the smoke-filled air. The colony had never seen such a craft before. It was not like the clumsy transports of the settlers, nor the jagged machines of the raiders. This was something different. Precise, sharp, and powerful. When it landed, the ground shook, dust rising, the raiders opened fire, but their weapons bounced harmlessly off the ship's shields. The hatch opened with a hiss, and figures stepped out, their armor unfamiliar, their movements calm and sure. Humans. Few in the galaxy had seen them. Fewer still had fought beside them. They were strangers here, outsiders, beings who had left their home world long ago and traveled across the stars. Rumors said they were dangerous. Rumors said they were clever. Rumors said they were unlike any other species. And now they stood face to face with the raiders, their weapons ready, their voices sharp as they shouted orders. The battle shifted. The raiders, once fearless, faltered under the sudden resistance. The humans moved like a unit, every step measured, every shot precise. For the first time that day, hope flickered across the burning colony. But for Leora, hope still felt far away. She was still only a mother, hiding in the ruins, clutching her child unseen, unheard. Forgotten. Then it happened. One of the humans, a soldier with a scar across his faceplate, broke away from his squad. He scanned the rubble, his eyes sharp, his steps purposeful. Leora froze, pressing her child tighter, afraid this new arrival would be no different than the others. Why would a human care? Why would anyone care? The soldier's gaze found her. For a moment their eyes met, her face pale and tired. Her child trembling, he stopped, lowering his weapon slowly, his voice softer than the chaos around them. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, the words clear, the tone steady. Leora's breath caught, tears rising against her will. Because no one had spoken to her like that in years. Still, fear chained her heart. She pulled her child closer, whispering, "Stay back. He will take you from me." The soldier shook his head, removing his helmet, revealing human eyes filled not with scorn, but with kindness. "I will not take," he said firmly. "I will help." He stepped closer, his movements slow, careful, respectful, and then he spoke the words that broke the walls around her heart. "You're not alone anymore." The world seemed to stop. The battle outside blurred into distant noise. For the first time in forever, someone had seen her. Not as a burden, not as a shadow, but as a mother. Her knees trembled. Her breath shook, tears fell freely. Her child looked up at the soldier with wide eyes, whispering, "Mother, he sees us." The soldier knelt, offering a hand not to take the child but to steady them. He handed Leora a small ration pack, food and water, something precious in this moment of terror. Her hands shook as she accepted it, because no one had ever given without demanding something in return. The soldier smiled faintly, not with mockery but with simple humanity. "Every mother matters," he said, "every child matters." Behind him, his squad continued to fight, pushing the raiders back. The colony leaders peeked from their shelters, shocked, confused, angry even. They could not understand why a human would waste time on someone so low in their eyes. But the soldier did not care. His focus was on the trembling mother and her child. To him, they were not worthless, they were not invisible. They were the very reason he fought. Leora could barely speak, her voice cracked. Why do you help me when no one else will?" The human looked at her, his expression steady, his words simple. "Because no one should face this universe alone." Her child smiled weakly for the first time in days, clutching her sleeve tighter, and Leora, though still afraid, felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope, a fragile spark, but real. As the battle raged on, she held her child close, not with despair this time, but with the belief that maybe, just maybe, they had finally found an ally. The battle slowly shifted in favor of the humans, their discipline and courage breaking the raiders' lines. The colony that once trembled in fear now hid behind its walls, peeking out only when the sound of human weapons thundered through the smoke. And there in the middle of that storm stood Leora, still holding her child, still unable to believe what had just happened for years. No one had looked at her as anything but a burden, but this strange human had spoken words that burned into her soul. "You're not alone anymore." When the fighting quieted for a moment, the soldier returned to her side, His armor scratched, his face darkened with smoke. But his eyes still kind, he offered her water again, pressing the bottle into her shaking hands. And though her instincts told her to refuse, her child's hungry gaze made her accept. The child drank first, small gulps of life in the middle of chaos, then Leora sipped, her throat burning but her heart strangely warm. She whispered, "Thank you," the words fragile, almost afraid to exist, and the soldier simply nodded, as if her thanks were unnecessary. Others in the colony began to notice from behind walls and shelters. They watched as the human knelt beside a woman they had ignored. Whispers rose, sharp and bitter. "Why her? Why waste time on her?" some muttered. "She is no fighter. She is no leader. She is nothing." The leaders frowned, angry that an outsider gave value to someone they themselves had crushed under silence for so long. But the human did not hear their whispers, or if he did not care. Instead, he asked Leora questions, simple questions, questions no one else had ever asked. "What is your name?" he asked, and she told him softly. "Leora." "How long have you been here?" he asked. And she said, "Too long." And then he looked at her child, his gaze gentle. "And what is your dream, little one?" The child blinked, surprised no one had ever asked before, then whispered, "To see the stars with my mother." The soldier smiled faintly and said, "A dream worth fighting for," that night. While the humans set up defenses and prepared for the next wave of raiders, the soldier returned again. He brought food, real food. Not scraps or spoiled grain, but warm rations that filled the air with a strange, rich smell. Leora hesitated, afraid it was a trick. But the soldier sat down beside her, eating from the same pack to show it was safe. Her child giggled softly as the taste filled their mouth, a sound that made Leora's heart ache with joy. It had been so long since she had heard laughter untouched by hunger or fear. The bond between them grew quietly. He never spoke with pity. He never looked at her as weak. Instead, he spoke as if she was his equal. He told her stories of distant battles, of how humans had once been underestimated too, of how they had learned to fight not only with strength but with heart. Leora listened, eyes wide, realizing she was hearing more respect in those words than she had heard in her entire life from her own people. For the first time, she felt the weight on her shoulders lessen, as if she was not carrying her world alone. But not everyone welcomed this bond. The colony leaders summoned the human commander, demanding to know why his soldiers were protecting the weak. "She has no value," they said, their voices sharp. "She cannot fight, she cannot lead, she is only a mouth to feed." But the human commander replied calmly, "A mother's strength is not measured in your numbers. A mother carries life itself. And that is greater than any army." The leaders were furious, their pride wounded. But they could not challenge the humans directly, so instead they turned their cold eyes toward Leora, whispering poison, planning ways to break her spirit once again. Still, the whispers could not undo what had already begun. Leora felt her child sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. She felt her heart grow lighter when the soldier returned each day with small kindnesses. A blanket, clean water, even a smile that told her she was seen. She began to believe that perhaps she was not invisible, that perhaps the universe still held a place for her. The bond between them was fragile, but it was real, and with each passing hour, it grew stronger. One evening, as the stars glimmered faintly beyond the smoke, the soldier stood beside her, looking at the sky. "Do you know why I fight?" he asked quietly. Leora shook her head, afraid to speak. "Because someone once told me I mattered. When I thought I was nothing," he said, his voice heavy with memory. "And now, I fight so others can know the same." Leora's heart ached. Her eyes filled with tears she could not stop. For the first time, she whispered back, "Then maybe I am not nothing." The soldier turned, meeting her gaze, and answered firmly, "You are not nothing, you are a mother. And that means you are everything." The words wrapped around her like armor. Stronger than steel, she held her child close, feeling their small heartbeat against her chest. And in that moment she realized that no matter what the colony thought, no matter what whispers tried to erase her worth, she had found someone who saw the truth. She was not alone, not anymore, and though she did not yet know it, the bond she had formed with this human would soon be tested in fire and blood. The colony was quiet after the first battle, smoke still rising from the broken walls. The raiders had retreated, but everyone knew they would come again. Stronger, faster, crueler. The humans worked quickly, repairing defenses, setting traps, preparing weapons, and while most colonists stayed hidden in fear, their leaders gathered in secret. angry whispers filling the council chamber. They could not understand why the humans had stopped to protect Leora. They could not accept that a woman they had ignored for years was suddenly noticed. Suddenly given value in their eyes, this was an insult, a threat to their control. For if a forgotten mother could be lifted up, what did that say about their own power, their own pride? So they decided to act. The next day, the human soldier, who had stayed close to Leora and her child, was summoned before the council. The leaders sat high on their stone seats, their faces cold, their voices sharp. "Why do you waste your strength on her?" one asked, pointing at Leora as if she was not even human, as if she was nothing more than dirt. "She cannot fight, she cannot build, she is weak, and weakness destroys us all," another added. Leora stood frozen at the doorway, her child gripping her hand tightly. Listening to every cruel word, the soldier did not flinch. He stood tall, his voice steady. "You call her weak," he said, his eyes burning. "But you do not see the truth." The leaders laughed bitterly. "And what truth is that, human? That a mother's tears will stop raiders? That her soft hands will break armor?" But the soldier stepped forward, his voice ringing through the hall. "A mother's strength is greater than any army. Her hands carry the future. Her courage keeps life alive when all else is lost." His words echoed, bold and defiant, a challenge no one in the room expected. The leaders grew red with anger. "You insult us with these words," they spat. "You shame our warriors. You disgrace our law." But the soldier only shook his head. "No, I speak the truth you are too blind to see. You worship power and forget that without mothers, there is no one left to fight, no one left to lead, no one left to survive." The council chamber fell silent, some colonists in the back lowering their eyes in shame, for deep down they knew his words carried weight. But the leaders could not allow such defiance. Not from an outsider and not for her. They turned their fury toward Leora. "You will bring us ruin," they told her coldly. "If you stay near these humans, you bring shame to the colony. You bring weakness to our people." Her child hid behind her dress, trembling. Leora's heart pounded, fear rising, but before she could speak, the soldier stood before her, blocking their scorn with his presence. "She will not leave, and she will not bow to your cruelty," he said firmly. "As long as I breathe, no mother will be cast aside." The leaders glared, powerless against his conviction, but their voices dripped with venom. "Then you are a fool, human, and you will regret protecting her. When the raiders return, you will see she will only drag you down." The soldier leaned closer, his words sharp as steel. "No, when the raiders return, you will see what true strength looks like." The challenge had been made. The bond between the human and the mother had become a fire the leaders could not extinguish. But outside the walls, the true storm was already gathering. The raiders had not been defeated, they had only been delayed. Their ships circled the skies once more, preparing for a second strike stronger than the first. That night, Leora sat beside her child, her hands trembling, her heart torn between fear and something new, pride. For the first time, someone had stood for her. Someone had spoken the words she had always carried inside. She whispered to her child, "Did you hear him? He said we are not weak. He said we are strong." Her child nodded, eyes wide, whispering back, "He believes in you, mother. And so do I." The words filled Leora with a fire she had never felt before. But the danger was not gone. It was closer than ever. The colony prepared in fear. The leaders whispered in anger. The humans stood ready in silence, and Leora knew a choice was coming. She could hide once more, waiting for others to decide her fate, or she could stand with the human who believed in her, with the child who depended on her. Her heart told her the truth. She could not run forever. As the night stretched on, the distant hum of raider engines filled the sky. Louder and louder, the stars vanished behind fire and smoke. The ground shook under the weight of enemy ships landing once again. The colony panicked, guards shouting, families screaming, leaders barking empty orders. But this time, Leora did not run to the shadows. She did not cower in silence. She stood at the edge of her small home, her child by her side, watching the horizon burn. And when the human soldier approached, weapon in hand, his eyes steady, she did not look away. He saw her trembling, but he also saw the spark in her eyes, the same spark that burned in his own heart. "You don't have to fight," he told her softly. "You only have to protect your child." But Leora shook her head, her voice quiet but unshakable. "No, I will fight because I am a mother." "And that is enough," the soldier nodded. respect clear in his gaze, and together, side by side, they faced the coming storm. The challenge had been made. The choice had been taken. And soon the galaxy itself would learn what it meant when a mother stopped being invisible. The night exploded with fire as the raiders returned. Their ships descended like dark vultures, blotting out the stars. Engines screaming as they tore through the sky. The ground shook with each blast. The colony walls cracked, and fear spread like wildfire through every street. Children cried, families screamed. Guards scattered, leaders shouted useless orders. The same leaders who had mocked Leora now trembled, their pride melting into panic. But Leora did not run this time. She stood at the edge of the settlement, her child safe behind her, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Beside her stood the human soldier, his weapon glowing faintly in the smoke-filled dark. For the first time, Leora was not invisible. For the first time, she was not fighting alone. The raiders poured through the broken gates, their armored boots striking the ground, their red visors glowing like cruel stars. They roared as they charged, weapons raised, ready to tear through the colony once again. But the humans were ready too, forming tight lines, shields locking, weapons firing in steady rhythm. The air cracked with energy bolts, sparks flew, screams echoed. The ground became a storm of fire and dust. The soldier turned to Leora, pressing something into her hands. It was a weapon, heavier than anything she had ever carried, humming with strange power. Her fingers trembled, fear rising, but his eyes steadied her. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "Fight not as a warrior, but as a mother. Fight for the one you love." Leora looked at her child, wide-eyed, whispering, "Be brave, my heart. I will protect you." The first wave of raiders crashed against the defenses. Blades and blasts clashed, the humans held firm, but the enemy was endless. One raider broke through the line, towering, armored, his weapon raised high. He charged straight toward Leora and her child, his laughter echoing like thunder. In that instant, something inside her ignited. She raised the weapon, her hands no longer trembling, and fired. The blast struck the raider's chest, knocking him to the ground, his laughter silenced forever. Her child gasped, staring at her with awe. "Mother, you did it." Leora's breath shook, but her eyes hardened. "I will do it again." As many times as it takes, more raiders came. Shadows in the smoke, red eyes cutting through the dark. She stood her ground, firing again and again. Each shot powered not by training, but by the fierce love burning inside her. The human soldier fought beside her, covering her when she stumbled, guiding her aim when her hands shook. Together they moved like one. An unspoken bond, mother and warrior, courage and skill. And every raider that fell was proof that she was not weak. She was not nothing, she was strength itself. Still, the battle grew heavier. The raiders pressed harder, their numbers overwhelming. The colony leaders cowered inside their shelters, refusing to help. But some colonists saw Leora fighting, saw her refusing to fall, and something began to stir inside them. If a mother they had scorned could stand, then maybe they too could rise. One by one they picked up weapons, joining the humans, adding their voices to the struggle. The tide began to shift, the colony no longer a frightened mass but a force rising from despair. And at the center of it all was Leora, her child watching proudly as she fought. Every blast she fired echoed with a promise. Every step she took carried the weight of generations. She was no longer invisible. She was the heartbeat of the fight. The raider leader stepped forward at last, larger than the rest, his armor black as night, his voice dripping with cruelty. He pointed at Leora, laughing. "This is your champion, this weak mother. This is who you protect." The human soldier raised his weapon, but Leora stepped forward first, her voice steady. "Yes, I am a mother, and that is why you will fall." The duel was fierce, the leader striking with brutal strength. Leora dodging, stumbling, but never letting go of the weapon. Her arms burned, her lungs screamed, but she thought of her child, thought of every insult, every rejection, every lonely night. She gathered all that pain, all that love, and with one final cry, she fired. The blast tore through the leader's chest, his laughter ending in silence, his body falling with a crash that shook the ground. The raiders faltered, their courage broken, their leader gone. The humans pressed forward, driving them back, the colonists adding their strength. At last, the invaders fled, their ships lifting into the sky, leaving only smoke and silence behind. The colony stood battered, burned, scarred, but alive. And at the heart of it all stood Leora, weapon still in her hands, chest heaving, eyes blazing with fire. Her child ran to her, hugging her tightly, whispering, "You are the strongest of all, Mother." The human soldier placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice filled with respect. "You have shown them what true strength means." Leora looked around, the colonists staring at her in shock. In awe, no longer able to deny the truth, she had fought, she had protected, she had survived, and for the first time, they saw her not as a burden, but as a hero. The battlefield was quiet at last. The smoke drifted slowly into the sky, the fires cooling into glowing embers. The colony that had once been filled with screams now stood in silence, the only sound the wind moving through broken walls. Bodies of raiders lay scattered outside the gates, proof that the invaders had been driven back. For the first time in years, the colony had survived an attack. Not by hiding, but by fighting together. At the center of it all stood Leora. Her hands still clutched the weapon, her body shaking with exhaustion, her eyes burning with fire. Beside her, her child hugged her tightly, their small face glowing with pride. The human soldier stood close, his armor scarred, his expression calm, his gaze filled with respect, and slowly, the colonists began to step out of hiding one by one, their eyes fixed on the mother they had once ignored. They could not believe what they had seen. This woman who they had mocked, pushed aside, and called weak, had stood when their warriors had hidden. She had faced the raider leader and struck him down. She had shown courage greater than any commander, and for the first time, shame filled their hearts. The leaders arrived. Their robes torn, their faces pale, they tried to speak, tried to command, but their voices shook. No one listened, no one bowed, for the eyes of the people were no longer on them. All eyes were on Leora, the mother who had fought, the mother who had bled, the mother who had carried them all to survival. One elder stepped forward, his voice soft, almost broken. "All this time, we called you nothing, but today you showed us what everything truly means." Leora's throat tightened. Her hands trembling, she did not know what to say. She had not fought for them. She had fought for her child. She had fought because love gave her no choice, but now, the colony looked at her as if she was a star shining in the darkness. Her child pulled at her sleeve, whispering proudly, "They see you now, Mother. They finally see." Tears filled her eyes. She held the child close, whispering back, "Yes, but I have always seen you. You are the reason I stood. The reason I fought." The human soldier stepped beside her, his voice steady, carrying across the crowd. "Do you see now?" he asked the colonists. "Strength is not only in weapons or in power, it is in love, in sacrifice, in the courage to protect life even when the world calls you weak." His words struck deep, because no one could deny the truth of what they had witnessed. From that day, the colony began to change. The people who once spat at her now greeted her with respect. The guards who once laughed at her child now lowered their heads when they passed. Even the leaders, their pride shattered, spoke to her with careful voices, though they knew they could never erase the years of cruelty. Leora did not need their apologies, she only needed the smile of her child, the knowledge that she was no longer invisible. The human soldier did not leave her side. Together they repaired homes, shared food, guarded the colony against small threats. But more than that, he continued to remind her of her worth. Every glance, every word, every moment showing her that she was seen. And soon others began to follow his example. Children who once mocked her child now played together. Mothers who once hid their faces now walked taller. Even men who had called her weak began to understand the strength in her eyes. One evening, as the stars stretched bright across the sky, the human soldier stood with her outside the gates. "You have changed them," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of truth. Leora shook her head. "No, I only did what any mother would do." But he smiled. "And that is why it matters, because the galaxy forgets." But she reminded them. Her heart warmed, the tears in her eyes now not of sorrow but of quiet joy. Her child pointed at the stars, whispering, "Mother, one day we will see them all together." She hugged the child close, whispering, "Yes, my heart. Together we will see everything." And for the first time, she truly believed it. The universe no longer felt empty, no longer felt cold, because she was no longer alone. The colony never forgot the night the raiders came. But more than that, they never forgot the mother who stood when no one else would. Songs were whispered about her courage, stories told of her fire, and slowly, her name became a symbol, not of weakness, not of pity, but of strength. Leora, the mother who was forgotten until she showed the galaxy that a mother is never nothing. And whenever someone asked the human why he had stopped for her, why he had risked his life for someone so small in the eyes of the colony, his answer was always the same: because no one should be alone, and no mother should be unseen. Leora carried those words in her heart forever. Through every sunrise, through every night under the stars, she carried them like a shield. Her child grew stronger, brighter, walking in the light of her love. And though scars of the past remained, they no longer defined her. She was not invisible, she was not forgotten. She was not weak, she was a mother, and she was never alone again.